This meeting, we're making it both an audio and a visual recording of the meeting, and if you're going to record any or part of this meeting, you need to let the commission know. With that, we'll go to the public meeting, public comment. Anything from the public that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing not, go to the public hearing notices of intent. And the following, the Lily Pond Realty Trust at 272931 North Liberty have all been continued to October 1st. So with that, we go to...
One more, Mr. Chairman, and then the Cumberland Farm ones. We were waiting for a file number for that and still
Okay.
haven't gotten that, so.
Wow. Is that to the first as well?
Mm-hmm. Yes, please. We're
Okay,
just trying to
so
make sure there was no one here for that.
So Cumberland Farm has also been continued then till the 1st. So with that, is anybody here to speak on those that cannot come back on the 1st, or will not want to issue written comments? Okay, so that takes us to guns at 357, 11, and 15 East Tristan Avenue.
We have hard copies, just we have the other info that came in.
Yep, I can bring you one right now.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, along with Sarah Alger. Before you tonight with the third public hearing for this project. I know we've spent an awful lot of time on it, so I won't get back into things we've already discussed to the extent possible. We have submitted additional information in response to the comments that were provided at the second hearing, as well as revised plans. So I'd like to first start by reviewing the revisions that were made to the plans. And they really center around, we had a lot of discussion at the last meeting with respect to the proposed extensions of the existing stone revetments and what would happen at the interface and how we were going to bring the proposed coir tubes to the stone. And so the real change, the only change to the plan is that on the easterly extension, what we've done is to propose to bring the second and top tube across the stone extension so that we have a sort of a staggered interlock interface. Instead of just having the revetment come down and the tubes run into it, we kept the base of the stone. The length is as proposed, around 55 feet, and then we'd have the coir tube, the second coir tube, run in through half of the stone, and then the top coir tube run across the top of the stone. So again, trying to reduce the overall size and mass of the stone, understanding that the commission had concern with the extension, and then to taper and interlock it. The westerly end, we left the same as it had fallen behind the timber bulkhead that used to be there. So there seemed to have been a greater level of comfort with that extension on the basis that it wasn't new, that it was behind a pre-existing structure. So, and that we've left that one as it was, and then made that change to the easterly end. The other thing I added on the second sheet was just a general profile of the revetment. It's just in a schematic form down on the bottom, but I just wanted to give you a sense of the height that we were going and that we would have some embedment into the beach. So again, we're looking to match to the maximum extent possible the stone revetments that are there, to minimize the extension of them so that they're really only what is just needed, so that we don't have the end of the stone that's there keep collapsing. That's the real, we're trying to maintain the integrity of the structure that's there with the stone, and not to have a whole new, if you will, stone revetment. The remainder of the project remains where, just to briefly go over, it consists of 3 tubes, coir-filled, sand-filled coir tubes, And then we had revised the plan to remove the zigzag fence between the first and second hearing and just to go to posts, so as to be similar to another approval and hopefully remove concerns the commission had with respect to the assemblage of materials constituting a coastal engineering structure. And we also, so that really takes care of the changes to the plans that we made. And then we've submitted additional information in letter form with respect to a regulatory analysis. There was discussion, quite a bit concerning whether the project as proposed met the performance standards and the protected interests of the regulations. So we had, we're working with an expert in this field who's done a lot of work statewide and has reviewed all of the information that I've had extensive discussions with concerning the proposal. And so he's prepared the letter that is that has been submitted. I don't want to take all of your time. It was in the packets. I'm sure that you have read that, but we would be happy to try to address additional questions or concerns that may arise from that correspondence or from the changes of the plan. And with that, we'd be happy to hear how you feel about the project as proposed and the changes that we've made. The letter that I submitted was really a cover letter to the plans, as well as to just state and address the concern that we had heard at the commission at the last meeting with respect to why have any stone extensions at all? Why not just do the tubes? And again, it really has to do with, and this is what I put in the wave forces on those angles. When we look at that, we believe it's going to be a continuing problem area that's going to require extensive maintenance and damage to these small sections that are angled to the ocean, and especially here on this side with the northeast exposure, but really even on the northwest when it's coming in like from either of these with that driving wind, what we're going to have is really a maintenance problem and more damage that would occur to a fabric soft type solution, which is exactly what we've tried and have proposed for the gap section between these two existing revetments. So again, we've tried to keep the extensions as minimal and as small. Haven't heard the concerns from the commission, and then to go with a soft solution in the middle. We'll have nourishment. We'll have reporting. The applicant's committed to all the same conditions that you've imposed on some other similar projects, which we believe have been successful not too far down the beach from here, and then to come in and also plant the upper portion of the bank with beach grass. And with that, I'd be happy to hear and try to address additional concerns.
Are there any additional questions for Art?
I'm curious again, you didn't want to do the lapping of the core on the west one?
Well, it's not so much that I didn't want, well, my thinking on that was, again, that it seemed that with the discussion that happened, that was behind a pre-existing structure, that a lot of the concern was on the easterly end. And I think that with the northeast exposure to that angle, and when we looked at the 2014 aerial and what we've seen occur, that the stone solution really was the better solution there. Now, if the commission felt strongly that sort of an interface was what should happen there, then we could consider that change. Mm-hmm. But my thinking was based on the discussion that was there. There seemed to be a level of comfort behind the other bulkhead, so that was why I only changed the one that there was really a lot of discussion about.
Right, as a pre-existing.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else from the commission? Anything from the public? Cormac?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council. Just a couple of comments. I think I'm still supporting, reiterating what Ms. McKinnon wrote in her July letter, even with these updates. And let me just go through step by step. For the wet easterly extension, I think there's information here that it is protecting a pre-78 house, but we do, as we've said in the past, feel that there's other more appropriate alternatives, such as a softer solution. Similar to the westerly extension right here, in terms of more appropriate alternatives and softer solutions. Also, using a justification of there used to be a timber bulkhead, this no longer has the ability under your own regulations for grandfathering status. I think grandfathering status means, well, I looked it up earlier.
It's 3 years, isn't it?
Because of the maintenance.
Has to be maintained.
Yeah, it's for existing structures, uses, and/or alterations which have been abandoned for 5 years or more shall not be reestablished. Any future use has to conform with the then provisions of the bylaw. So there's that aspect as well. And then for the interior portions, I can definitely relate. There's in somewhat of a catch-22. When I look at this and when I look at all the other past applications before you, particularly all the ones that are on Eel Point Road and the Eel Point area and the conditions that you've issued, these are all considered as coastal engineering structures. So if you determine, again, that this is a coastal engineering structure, your pre-78 house is 129 feet away from the bank. That clearly is not an imminent danger. And also, you're protecting gap lots. You could call it gap lots. I think they're fairly extensive, large vacant lots that don't have pre-78 buildings in them. If you're leaning, we don't feel, we sympathize with the catch-22, but we feel that it should be declared a coastal engineering structure. And then unfortunately, because of the distance to the pre-78 building on the middle lot, a coastal engineering structure cannot be built. And then for the 2 vacant lots, a coastal engineering structure can be built per the state and local bylaw. And then so that's our first point. But if you're leaning towards approving this, please make sure that there is clear, concise language as to how this is or is not a coastal engineering structure, so that it may not, so can not be used for other applications. For other individuals wanting to protect houses that may be pre-78 that are in nowhere near your jurisdiction, that has the potential for really causing some problems in the future.
Thanks, Connor. Anything else from the public on guns? Anything else from the commission?
I agree with Cormac's review.
Yeah, I don't remember the vote that, I have some vague memory of the vote that this was at one point considered not a coastal engineering structure. I can't remember if I voted.
This is 3 core bags, 3 core bags and big posts. We've had 2 core bags and a single row of fencing. I think we've only in one, most of the time we do consider it a coastal engineering.
Yeah, I would think
And with
so.
revetment, I mean, you can't parse it out as to what parts are, I mean, it's one application across 3 lots. So you could say with the stone revetment underneath it regardless, but I would consider even 3 core bags and the post, to me, as a coastal engineering structure, but each person's different.
I don't think we voted on it. Wasn't it the state that didn't consider them?
No, the state.
Or
We did vote,
we did
but
vote on it? Whether we-
I think we're talking about a little bit of apples and oranges a bit. The things that the state recommends or views or CZM views as not coastal engineering structures are more pointed towards the solid core log.
Yeah.
They view sandfield tubes very similarly, but they leave it up to kind of discretion for how they go together or how they front together. I think that's for you guys to decide. I mean, our definition's pretty broad that it's any assemblage of materials, but I think within there, I mean, I think that's what you guys have to parse out as far as
Well, this is
whether
a
it is or
structure
isn't.
that's designed to re-nourish the beach with sand, the core tubes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in effect, it can and will be degraded and go away.
Well, and it
It's
makes
not
sense to
permanent.
define it as a structure and then give it a waiver. If you think it's something that makes sense to
That
be there, I
makes
think
more
it's,
sense,
it's always makes more sense to say, yes, we consider this combination of 3 core logs that have helical anchors, a solid 8-foot post. That's pretty substantial. And then if you're inclined to permit it, do so, and just say we issued a waiver. But I wouldn't call it not a structure. But that's, and especially with the revetment included, that, to me, that's enough of a, that's more than just one core
I agree,
log.
revetment is-
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, in my mind, I'm not including the two as a pair, but, I mean, it definitely, when we were talking as it not being a structure, I wasn't quite sure about that.
So again, you do have the ability, I mean, obviously, as you look and you do a review, and we do it regularly with other things, when we look at materials and things to, I mean, you can certainly find that different pieces of a project are different things. You guys have the ability to define things as long as it's within the project. So the stone revetment, I don't think anyone's going to argue that it's a coastal engineering structure. That one's pretty clear. We found that before. We've discussed that before. You know, going through, you know, if you're doing the stone with the core in front, you can have that as a coastal engineering. But you can also look at the other pieces and determine other things. You know, whether it's a coastal engineering structure or not a coastal engineering structure. And then if you want to grant waivers on that specific portion and that type, I think in the waiver discussion, if that's the route of the commission, that'll be incumbent upon us to put the language that's very clear to the specific site conditions, to the specific aspect of the project that you're granting waivers on and for. Not just a, I don't want to say generic waiver write-up, but I think to break out each aspect and discuss it, I think would be appropriate to do, and certainly to make findings on the different components as they're, I mean, obviously you're not going to do the posts in front of the tubes are this. The tubes behind those posts are this.
Well,
Like,
what's
and obviously is what's
Oh,
working
right.
in
You're right,
tandem.
that one unit.
Yeah, but
One thing that I think is not, I appreciate that we're adding this deep level of detail, but I don't think it's helping us on the next application, because inevitably and frequently in this area, we're having other ones that we've approved for very different situations, where the house is much closer, it's
Right.
easier to vegetate, and then that's attached to the next application
Right.
as if they were apples and apples.
Right.
And I don't feel like we're giving ourselves enough protection in our wording.
Right. All right,
You're giving ourselves protection from what?
I don't think that we're wording it as well as Jeff thinks we are, where we're saying, well, we need to be very clear as to why in this case it's X, Y, and Z. I think that whole permit gets attached to, and it has been, to the next permit application. They say, well, you approved it next door, why not in this case? In this case, there's 2 empty lots. The house on the top's 129 feet back. This is not a constrained lot
Right.
with, like the Octagon house, where there was nowhere to go. Absolutely nowhere for them.
it's not an imminent danger situation.
It's not imminent danger
And
situation.
my biggest problem is that, the vacant lots, I mean, I think it's a really bad
Precedent.
precedent or just plain decision to allow something, I think at least under the local bylaw would clearly be a structure, a coastal engineering structure on vacant lots. That should not be protected in that house. I mean, there's many, many years of time before that place is.
And there's plenty of room on the other lots to move around too.
In terms of the mitigation and and sort of the impacts here, we have something we think is approvable or we don't. It seems to me we're getting roughly, I don't understand being afraid to approve the thing because somebody else might want one if it complies with the standards, or if it can be approved, then we'll deal with the next one when it comes.
Why would
Well,
you
I
put a
think-
structure or anything on a perfectly good beach? I mean, it's a perfectly good beach in a bluff and there's nothing behind it. Why should you just build protection for
Tomato,
nothing?
tomato, potato, potato. Some people want this, some people want that, I think.
There's nothing to protect.
Well, I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that and see where a vote might come out. But I'm just expressing my concerns with the project.
Well, that's my point, is if we focus on the project, we'll figure out, and we'll decide what we decide, yeah.
Yeah, and I would still like to see something softer on the western side, just because the bulkhead does look fairly dilapidated that was there previously.
And just look at revetment under
Yeah.
the core. So, I mean, as long as there's revetment in there, I'm not voting. I would not vote for an extension of the revetment.
Well, I'm not sure that having a bulkhead there at one time means that you're grandfathered for a revetment. I mean, you're grandfathered for a bulkhead, maybe.
Maybe, and I don't think you're grandfathered for, yes. It's totally different things.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of comments in response to both what we heard from Cormac and what I'm hearing here. Again, the dune guard, and he mentioned the 5 years, while it has been maintained in the last couple of years, it was there, at some period, and I could, I think it's been maintained.
He's talking
within
about the
5 years.
bulkhead, I thought.
Oh,
Not the dune guard, or maybe I misunderstood.
maybe I did as well, but again, we had, part of this proposal is to get rid of the plastic dune guard, zigzag stuff on the beach, and to come to a soft solution instead. Where we saw that as something that would be considered beneficial. Also, to get into a program of adding sand on a regular basis. If the commission, while we don't feel that this assemblage of materials, based on, again, the past decisions and the fact that we've removed the zigzag fencing, is a coastal engineering structure, but if that's where you were going, one thing that I think differentiates this project from others, and why, if you were to write your order, is that it is a gap situation. That we're in a situation between two existing stone revetments as well. So I think that could provide a basis for your justification in this particular case, again, with every site being different. And again, we're trying to maintain the integrity of the structures that are there. Otherwise, we're going to have those keep falling as well. So again, I thought that was worth mentioning. And the ongoing sand is something that, again, with the monitoring, we can, you're going to get reports to see how this is functioning as a soft type project. That then we're going to be able to plant the bank with the beach grass and hopefully have a stable slope that still serves all your interests. The beach is getting the sand. I mean, that's ultimately your protected interest of storm damage prevention remains, and then the protected interest of the transfer of sediment from a bank to a beach is also there. So, I mean, that's the kind of project that we've tried to come in with. It's difficult to sit here and hear that this project is being considered the same as if we had proposed a stone revetment the whole way. Otherwise, I mean, that's what the owners would have liked, but again, I see how then that doesn't meet your interests, protected interests. So we're trying to have a project before you that does that, and that's where the stone we've kept just to the bare minimum. Again, you'll have sand that's bought and placed here on a regular basis with the monitoring. So I don't want to repeat myself, but I think it's an important point to make.
Well, an example of a non-structure that we've approved would be a single row of zigzag fencing, sand placed there as beach nourishment, and then plantings on top would give you some level of protection, and we've definitely not voted that as a structure in the past. So there are
But then we
alternatives.
keep the dune guard, which,
I'm fine with that.
I don't think anybody, well,
It's
that's...
permitted. It was permitted before.
I mean, the plastic is something that really, the maintenance associated with that, and then with no nourishment. So we feel that we're trying to, we want to put sand down and meet your interests.
But
and
there's
then
ways you could do that.
also, not have it, to have it more closely, the purpose of the tubes in the project is to have the release of that sand more closely mimic that natural rate of erosion instead of just having it transported so readily. And I'm not trying to be argumentative, I just wanted you to understand where our position of the protected interest is met.
Any other questions or comments from the public or the commission? Okay, well, in that case,
Close?
well, it's up to Art.
Well, I guess we're sort of wondering perhaps where the commission may be on this, I don't know. It's kind of hard, well,
I think we're
Is there
split.
additional information that you'd want? I guess is the question we
Thank you.
have. Is there anything that we haven't provided that you'd like to see? Because if so, then we'd like to.
Well, one thing that I don't know if it'll make any difference, but, if this is a gap situation, is there evidence that this is eroding faster here than other places on the shoreline?
Given that it wouldn't
Yeah,
meet
I mean,
performance
It still
standards,
doesn't fit
it doesn't-
the performance standard.
I mean, our regulations say we can't approve it. The way I read it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm looking at the aerial stuff right now. I mean, it actually seems to have less erosion between the 2 points. The points accentuate it, make it look like it's being gouged, and it is getting gouged at the end of the revetments. But
Yeah.
I mean, if you look along the beach, the farther west, the beach is farther back than it is between these two. So in some respects, I think it's actually being protected to some degree. It's trapping sediments between the revetments.
Well, if they did something like
Yeah.
nourishment and planting, that might actually,
I would argue, I mean, I'm not too crazy about doing stuff the full length in between. I personally don't have too much of a problem with extension of the revetment with a soft end. A hair, just, a small on the west side one, and softening the ends of the east side one or something. I mean, I like the idea of the lapping. I think that might be more appropriate. I mean, you're going to have a continuous problem with this thing. I mean, we approved this. I mean, we are approving a lot of these, I agree. But
Well, we're approving
Is that
it on
necessary,
lots
and is that bad in itself? Is there something wrong with approving the projects that meet the standards?
but this one doesn't.
well, it sort of defeats the whole standard. I mean, it's like we're not.
We've
Yeah.
approved them where there's
A need.
pre-78 homes that are
Right.
in,
Jeopardy. And with no other alternatives, other
Yeah.
things that wouldn't work, that maybe are, other compromises.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly just don't see that middle area being is in danger once you get away from the revetments. It's
That's a good point.
yeah.
I mean, if we did a sense of the commission, if that's helpful to them, I don't.
Well, I like the project. Again, I liked it last time. I think it's smart to try to protect it. It's going to just keep eroding around the two returns unless something's done across the face. I think these guys have trimmed it down as much as they could to have any great effect.
well, it's the nature of hard structures like revetments to have in-scour.
It is.
That's
I
their,
know.
That's why they're bad.
mhm.
So making them
But they're
longer
there.
and,
And they're a maintenance
But they're
issue.
there.
yeah, their
So-
maintenance issue, but they're
Mhm.
moving that problem inward onto their property more. It just. I don't think it's
Well, an
necessary.
angled return should help, but
I think they're trying to protect the returns. I mean, that's what they're doing.
Mhm.
I have less problems with the revetment portion than I do with the interior.
Well,
There's a
I don't
mix.
like Either one, so. What do you think?
I don't think we should protect the vacant lots and a house that's not really in danger of kind of falling over.
It's 1, 2, 3, big one.
I agree with that. It's not the revetment so much as the in-between.
Mhm.
If you'd like to request a continuance for 2
Okay.
weeks, please.
Thanks. It's
Thank you.
hard to keep you having come back.
No, this is the process. I appreciate the input.
Better
Thank
than
you.
a big fat no.
Okay, unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue this to October 1st. Okay, thanks. Okay, that's that one. Cumberland Farms continued. That takes us to Arnold Lloyd at 11 East Street.
So it's actually Lloyd Arnold.
Lloyd Arnold.
Mr.
Oh,
Arnold contacted me today. He was unable to make it tonight.
how would you know? I mean, it could go either way.
I thought I would help out and try to go over it briefly. So what we have for you guys, and I'm probably just the older plans, but we did field check them and verify them. I'm sorry. Mr. Arnold would like to construct a small 8-foot by 8-foot with some stairs that come off parallel to the building off of an existing structure within the buffer zone to a coastal bank. So you can see the door's been in, we verified with the building department since the early 80s. It's had varying degrees of access out the back. So we just like to build a platform that encompasses the width of the door with some stairs that go down. It does require waivers, which he requested under no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative, as it's already in a previously developed area, and there's no other place to put the stairs for the door.
It's within 25 feet or 50?
If the maximum distance from the end of the deck to the top of the bank is right around 40 feet. So most of it is.
Outside of 25 and...
It's all significantly outside the 25 for buffer zone.
Yeah.
Well,
Should be an easy waiver.
yeah, I think, anybody have any questions or
Talking
comments?
wooden steps?
Yes, it's all
Pretty
constructed
straightforward.
out of wood. The end post is supposed to be 2 sonotubes to hold it up, and that's all just be constructed in place on the existing door.
Yeah, I think if he would have had that in there when he built the house, if he had to come in, I think we probably would have approved it.
Sure,
Mhm.
yeah, you have to be able to get out.
Required.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be
Required by code.
he only has one mean of egress in and out of the house now in
Yeah.
the front, so this would be the second.
Sandy, I think I understand he's getting a little older, and I think I have a much better understanding of those kind of things now.
It's
Yes.
a good thing he wasn't here, he would.
I'm going to jump to this. Who are you calling old?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but,
No, I think a second meeting is.
okay, anything from the public on Arnold?
Motion to approve.
Wait. No.
I didn't get a chance to, Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council, I didn't get a chance to speak with Jeff on this one, but in terms of the wetland delineations, I'm not concerned with the project, it's just you're nailing these in stone for 3 years, and I'm just wanting to make sure that these were correct.
Yep, we went out, I verified those, and we also sent more inside out to verify those.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Okay, thanks, Corn.
Good point.
Okay, I have a motion to
Close the hearing.
Close.
Close the hearing.
Yes.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Price, 35 Baxter Road.
For the applicant, Eric Gasparo, Blackwell Associates. I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent application for a property on the east side of Baxter Road. And shown in front of you in blue is the existing top of Coastal Bank. And then in pink are the 25, 50, and 100-foot buffer zones. The proposal is to lift this structure in its current position and to install a foundation and a basement. There's no change of the position of the structure. There are window wells that are proposed to serve the basement windows, and then an additional step. The proposed first floor is proposed to come up about 8 inches or so one additional step would be needed. And that really is the project in a nutshell. We've shown the proposed limit of work outside of the 25-foot buffer zone. We have asked for a waiver on the basis of no reasonable alternative or adverse impact, which is as related to the step. Work on the structure partially within the 50.
So the only new structural or component at all is that step.
And the window wells, depending on how you look at the
They're
window
outside-
wells.
They're outside the
Yeah.
50, though.
Right.
So it already has a full basement, or it's just...
No, so that's
Okay.
that's what they're putting in.
Is there any issue with, there's no issue with groundwater?
No, we're up at elevation 60.
They have plenty of storage and for picking up.
I believe it meets all of your performance standards and protected interests.
It'll all be done from the backside.
Sure, from the road, again, with the silt fence and limited work, that's, as I said, outside of the 25. Really, as you can see, the 25-foot buffer zone doesn't, it just barely even extends on the property in the southeast corner.
Okay, anything from the public on Price?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Cormac Collier, Nantucket Land Council. Through you, so our if I could, this is well south of all the activity on the north side of Baxter Road.
Oh, very, very far. So we're at number 35. I believe the work up there is somewhere around 67. with
Got
Blue
it.
Dogs.
I'm just alluding to the perched wetlands that are out there in the groundwater, even though they're very high.
Yeah.
It's the groundwater concerns up there and the foundations being built and channeling all the groundwater out that the cliff. But that's where it is. Thank you.
And for the record, the locus map that was included with the filing shows that that's not the area with the wetland resource areas nearby.
That has been a problem.
I agree.
Okay, no other questions? Do we have everything we need to close, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Art, would you like to close?
Please.
Do I have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks. Walsh, 46 Shimler Pond Road.
For the applicant, Art Gaspar, Blackman Associates, along with Cinder Gaynor. We are before you today with a notice of intent application for a property located in Shimo, which has existing coastal air engineering structure and protection. And the proposed project that we're here for is for some stabilization measures for the upper reaches of the coastal bank above the existing timber bulkhead. The timber bulkhead is overtopped in certain extreme storm situations and has caused erosion and slumping of the bank on top of the bulkhead. There was also an enforcement order on this property as a result of some unpermitted cutting. So this notice of intent is proposed as a response and to remediate the enforcement order action. What we're proposing to do is to install above and behind the existing timber bulkhead just a single sand-filled coir tube, and then to put in two 1-foot coir logs staggered heading up the bank, so that it ultimately becomes 3 rows, as you can see here. So here you have your existing bulkhead, and then we would put in a tube and then 2 logs, and then fill the
Welcome to our automated attendant. If you know the...
Sorry.
Hello.
Making sure everybody's awake.
Stop
Sorry
playing with the
about
buttons.
and to fill the face of the bank where it has slumped and eroded, and above the coir log and tube that's proposed with a sand silty organic soil mix, which Cinda can discuss in a little more depth if you have some questions about it. She's taken samples and had them analyzed, and we've included that with the filing. And so what we're hoping to do is then to plant native species in the material that's placed to create a stable slope above the timber bulkhead, and to establish again a vegetated, stable coastal bank along the area for above the existing bulkhead. The other alternative, which I had considered and decided against, would have been to increase the height of the timber bulkhead. We thought that we considered this to be a more reasonable alternative to meet your protected interests in coming in with, again, a solution that ultimately could provide sediment to the adjacent resource areas, would not act as increasing the height of a hard structure, and also gives us then the ability to create that vegetated area across there. And with that, I'd like to give Cinder an opportunity if there's anything you wanted to add, or just wait to respond to questions.
Well, I've been doing a lot of research through the winter and this year, which some of you are aware of, on mycorrhizal associations. I became interested in this. Previously, a project that I was not involved in had dumped pit sand down in this area, and it had just been left there for a number of years. I got tired of seeing that, added some beach grass to it a couple months before Sandy and the other storm hit. But even as I was planting, it was like, this is wrong. I'm so tired as a horticulturalist and a restoration horticulturist working with dead soil that I know is never going to go anywhere. This really goes against my grain, but client wants it, okay, I'll just do it. And then it all washed out to sea, and it was like, okay, if we start again, what is this about? So my objectives have been to attempt to discover ways that vegetation can more rapidly establish itself as kind of perhaps an ultimate soft armoring technique. I see a lot of plantings being done. They're all being done in dense soils, and it's just cynical. There's no sense in doing it except somebody's making some money. And I think that there's a real opportunity in working with plants, the mycorrhizal associations, doing some adjustments to the soil structure other than just the pit quarry sands, to see if indeed we could not find ways to more rapidly establish the plantings. It's really that simple. I could get a lot more complicated about it, but I don't know about that.
But it's a combination of sand, silt, and instead of just having one type of 500 micron sand, it's more closely what's coming off that bluff. Kind of going to our other stuff.
Ultimately, I'll say, ultimately what I really would like to do, because of my understanding of mycorrhiza and its requirements, and dealing with the pit sand, is I would like to be able to add more organic material to the soils mix than what we have requested in the application. I have not arrived at any figures. I've been talking to the USDA. I've been talking to a lot of experts to come up with that figure. Normally, there was a great project done in Duxbury some years ago where they used quarry sand, but then they covered it over with about a foot of actual beach sand. And actual beach sand does have a lot of organic material in it. It's silt. It's nothing that any soil sample is ever going to register as being worthwhile. But there's silt and a lot of other materials that are mixed into beach sand, whereas the quarry sand is just dead subsoil, and there's nothing in there, really. You might have a little bit of clay or whatever. And I know from my research that the mycorrhizal associations are going to be much healthier with a quantity of organic material mixed into them. And I've gone everywhere from, instead of the coral, the big sausage, to thinking about doing, Jeff and I talked about this last winter, even looking at some of what they call the oogle culture techniques that are employed in permaculture. Basically, you bury brush and logs under soil so that you're maintaining the source of moisture retention, and you're also maintaining a resource for the microbial community to feed off of. We didn't go that way. We went with this. But I do think that it is important that more organic material than what shows in the soil sample be added in to better support the mycorrhizal associations, because I think that ultimately is what is going to help us more rapidly establish the plant community.
Perfect.
Okay, shut up.
Any questions from the commission?
What was the diameter of that lower bag?
3.5 feet.
Yeah,
The same profile. That's sort of how they come out.
Yeah.
If you will, with they have the same crew build them. They're doing it. It's
Yeah.
heavy stitched and.
That's the standard.
So you're going to have the mixed material over everything. And
Right.
then going
Would
up
be overall.
And
Probably
in the
put
bag
it
as
in
well?
layers, not necessarily mixed.
We could do it either way. I wrote it up as sand, within the tube. I would suggest using sand in the
Yeah.
tube and then using the organic mix for your cover material, because I don't really anticipate.
And inoculate it as we apply it, as well as the plants being inoculated. Double inoculation. Inoculate the soil
With microbes, not with,
with
you're not saying put a lot
mycorrhizal
of,
spores.
okay, but you're not saying put a lot of peat or loam or stuff like that?
No.
Okay.
No. I actually, well, because it's available, I was thinking of doing maybe even some mix with the dump compost, but I'm happy to go with whatever it is that the commission thinks might be advisable.
Yeah.
And still really a long conversation with the Cape May Plant Center this morning and saying, give me some figures here. Give me some figures here. And he just sent me a whole bunch of research that I got right before I got here. Oh, I can't say what the ideal mix of organic matter is in there. I just know it's got to be more than queries now.
Well, I think our main concern is just that the plants take hold.
Yeah, that stabilizes, yeah.
And that you don't use excess fertilizer, which it sounds like
To
you're
me,
doing
that's
both
what
of
this
those.
is about, so that this has gotten some establishment in it by the time this is gone.
Mhm.
And if I may, I think the application and the plans are sufficient in terms of calling for a sand, clay, silt mix. And then the order could be crafted such that the final mix be approved at the staff level prior, that a sample be provided prior to installation. And then in terms of meeting the concern and interest with the vegetation taking hold and being established, that's where a requirement for a monitoring report could cover that.
And we have a plant list?
Primarily at this time, and I'm still wrestling over some of this, primarily it's beach grass.
Okay.
At this time. There's a lot of evidence talking about successional growth that Koski and Gemma have done, and it's kind of left me a bit puzzled for a while, because ideally I would like to be able to do beach grass on the Solidago Sempervirens, maybe even the Rosa Carolina, because it's got
The
such
weed
fabulous
list, yeah.
root system.
Right.
Gracious, it just knits everything up. But there's some aspects of succession that I'm rather puzzling through. And interestingly enough, in this last conversation I just had with the Cape May Plant Center, they just last year started a research project to see if indeed planting the beach grass, the Solidago, the Lapis latifolias, and a few other species all at the same time was more effective than just starting with the beach grass and the Solidago sempervirens and letting time and the natural succession happen. There's changeovers in there, but in my research I have yet to be able to find timeline.
I don't know about this setting. I know in prairies, you're much better off if you introduce the diversity at the beginning, because those grasses take up so much space that they basically become so competitive that things can't get started unless you punch a hole in it, and so you're better off to let things get started.
Koski and Gemma found, and they were working up in the Provincetown dunes, this successional thing happening. They started with just the beach grass. And then, again, I don't have the timeline right off the top of my head. And then in time, and not a vast amount of time, they found that there was a change in the type of mycorrhiza and a change in the vegetation itself, and then a successional growth coming in on that. And they were talking a bit about some of bayberries and other types of ericaceous species, which is a whole different type of mycorrhiza association. So I really want to get Mr. Koski and Gemma over here to talk to all of us about this stuff, so that we can nail it down a little more specifically for this application.
Okay.
Well, if you want to try to move this forward, Cinda,
I'll
then
shut up now.
we need to. Right. I appreciate your. But what we've done on the is to list native species on the plan, And, you know, again, if it was, you know, just so primarily beach grass, and then anything that would be supplemented.
You
And
should
again,
list all of those so that you give yourself the most flexibility.
So, and again,
As
I
long as
mean,
it's
if
native.
the order allowed for staff approval of the final plant list, and then they'd have to be native prior to the start of construction, I think that would give Cinder a little time during the appeal period, should this be approved during the appeal period, to perhaps fine tune the plant list. And not have to have this keep pending on unless there's additional information that you did need.
Are you suggesting you were to have the hearing closed?
Unless there's additional questions
Yeah, I
or
think there's
information
still
or
a couple more
concerns, then
questions.
sure, yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I do have one quick question. I just wanted to verify, just from my understanding, the core logs, the 1 foot diameter logs, are those anchored into place? Or those
staked?
Staked, okay.
Yeah, we were asking that the other day. So just a wooden stake?
That's right.
Okay.
That's what I thought it was.
No, that was a
I
question we had
wanted
the other
to
day.
double check. That's it for me.
And, oh, excuse me, it looked like, it was kind of beat up, and it looked like there was some knotweed
Oh, yeah.
in there, and that would not be good to leave underneath, because it'll just come back through.
We're working
But you have to say that. You have to tell us.
Well, then,
You have to,
I wasn't aware of the knotweed situation. So I would, you know, we would, of course, be willing to do knotweed control under best management
you have
practices.
to apply for that officially.
With
That's what we're saying.
reporting. And if we needed to continue this, I'm not trying to rush anything, so if this needed to be continued, to provide that in writing, that's something that we could do. If the commission was comfortable with including a condition in the order that said, you know, knotweed control according to best management practices with the standard reporting, we're amenable to that.
You've got two more
Okay.
hands up, I think.
Cormac, did you have? No? Yes.
Just a question, and maybe Jeff can answer. I see that there's a paper road, an extension of Shimo Pond Road called Shore Road, which goes to the water. I just wondered if there's a public access there. It's a private road, I think.
There is not a public access there.
There is
That is
not.
that is a private road. The regular Shimo access, with the Shimo parking lot that people remember is
Is further to the
is
east?
to the west.
To the west.
And that's where that access point is. But this one is a non-constructed private way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else from the public or the commission?
And for the knotweed, I don't know if we need I mean, I'm fine with having a condition that says as long as they're doing our best management practices that they're allowed to. I mean, that's kind of a
Well,
no-brainer. but-
We've had a pretty standard set of conditions for knotweed removal
Yeah.
that specified, quantities and herbicides and treatment methods. It's something we can certainly condition for the management of knotweed. And we saw it on the site visit. I mean, that's one of our roles is to also protect our interests as best we can. We can see things on the field viewing and within reason, obviously, put conditions forth to help protect those interests. And if this case is managing knotweed, then we can certainly condition the management of knotweed. So,
I don't think did we see any other invasives? Technically, you were going to ask first, but, so, treating. It looked like it had been
There
treated.
was,
So,
and we can have standard monitoring and things that go with that. Obviously, for any case where we're going to be revegetating and putting stuff in, we would have monitoring and things with it, and it's very similar to what we would expect for invasive species control. So I don't think it's really that much different to add that component in.
Is everybody okay with sort of the idea of having staff approval of the final planting mix?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then I think, Jeff, we have everything we need to close the hearing.
We do.
We have you guys ready
do
to
you
close?
want to close?
Yes, sir.
We have a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Innovation is always a good thing. Not usually a good thing.
I think this is great. This is an experiment I'll look forward to.
Okay, that takes us to the public meeting request for determination.
On this one, I'm going to recuse.
Okay.
Just because it's my landlord. I think it's fine.
Sorry, I didn't draft it.
You've got a full form, so.
4 Beelman at 3 and 5 Loretta Lane.
For the applicant, Art Gasparo, this is a request for determination of applicability. There's no work that's proposed. This is for the confirmation of resource area boundaries. The boundaries have, we have a bordering vegetated wetland that's defined by the flags that are shown. Essentially, one BVW up on the northern end, and then an isolated wetland down along the side of the road towards the southerly end of the property. We also have land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is denoted by elevation 9.4. That's based upon the newly adopted FEMA maps as of June of this year. And that's the extent really of what we're before you with, is just the confirmation of the bound review and confirmation. And I'd be happy to address any questions or concerns there may be with the delineation or the plan.
Jeff, were these flags
Yes,
checked?
we did verify all of the flags.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns?
I still have poison ivy.
Poison ivy grows everywhere, doesn't it? Wet, dry?
And it always finds its way between like any piece of both.
Okay, there's no other.
Is there a recommendation on this?
Yep,
Mr.
I would
Chairman?
recommend a positive 2A, verifying the resource area boundaries as described by Mr. Gaspar.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Commissioner Okai
I spelled it correctly.
recused. Okay. Certificates of compliance.
Pen for you?
Blue.
All right, the first one is a carryover from last time, Mr. Chairman. I can always get out the plans.
Okay, crossbar.
Yep, the crossbar here. This is the one that we were waiting for the plans last time. The as-built plan that had been provided didn't show the wetland boundary or the buffer zones. We've since received the plan that does, and the structure is outside the 50-foot setback, and built in substantial compliance with the original permit plan as shown.
So you've got a plan with the wetlands, because
Correct.
I don't see any wetlands on here.
So there's no issues with it?
Nope, I would recommend that we could issue it.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Compliance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Jelemy at 29 Quays Road. That name sure comes up a lot.
Might I inquire, Mr. Chairman, if the staff recommends
Well,
approval on each of these?
We always go through them.
Yeah, we're going to go through them, Mike. I'm sorry.
To answer your question, Mr. Bullock, yeah, I will be telling you yes to that question.
After each one.
So, Mr. Jelemy, I know we have a number of outstanding orders. This is one of the older ones. This was for some work on the septic system and the connecting of the house to the garage via the breezeway, and some other small site improvements. The most recent one we've seen on this one was the one that involved the pool, then the hot tub, then the hot tub with the pool, then the pool, then the hot tub. It's not this order. This is kind of the predecessor for that, but I would also confirm that everything is built within substantial compliance for this project as well, and there are no conditions that I would recommend to be ongoing conditions.
Okay, so you recommend to approve.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Sacerdote, 19 Kimball Ave.
This is the one that was for the reconstruction of the house on Kimball Ave, and then it was later amended to include the reconstruction of the set of beach stairs. This also involved the pullback of the house a little bit. I'll get this plan out. To be located completely outside of the 50-foot setback. The house is constructed as shown on the as-built. It's outside, and the stairs are built in compliance. Again, there were no
Okay, do I have a motion to issue?
Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Jared, 10 and 12 Monomoy Creek Road.
Sure. So this one, so a little different. This one was for, my brain is failing me. Yes, this was for the removal of an existing cottage and garage, and then the relocation of the existing house. We've also seen this one since then too for some additional work on a different order. This is the one that I'll get out the original permitted plan and this one because it makes more sense. And you see them both together. And when you just sort of see them, so I'll read that here first. So the original proposal was for the relocation of the dwelling back to here, removal of the cottage and the garage. So the other cottage was going to remain in place. And as you can see from the as-built plan, the house has been relocated back, the garage, other structure has been removed, just leaving the original shed in this one. Sorry, I'll bring it back. So to put everything in position, again, we've been out on this site recently too, for some additional work. So this is the house that pulled back into this location, the cottage and the garage left, and we're down in this area here. So we've completed the project again, in substantial compliance with the order as it was approved.
This is the one with the 50 bank.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have a separate open order one.
Okay.
I would recommend that this could be issued a certificate of compliance on this specific order.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
All right, and the last one.
MCRH, 468, 10, and 12 Monomoy Road. I don't remember that name. It's just like-
MCRH, it actually stands for Monomoy Creek Road Homeowners Association.
Oh, okay.
Homeowners?
It's not in our packet, yeah.
No, and I'll explain why. This was one that we've already issued before, and this isn't a typical reissue in a sense of when the certificate of compliance was put on record, it was only put against the unregistered pieces of land. And some of them are also registered, but need to get recorded on the land court certificate, but it's already been a recorded document, and you can't re-record the recorded
I got it.
document. So
Just tell us to sign it.
we're reissuing so they can record it correctly on the remaining pieces of property. So it's already been issued, so there's no ongoing conditions necessary, it's just a paperwork cleanup.
I have a motion to issue.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, orders of conditions.
All right, I'll pass those around. So just disregard the one for Cumberland Farms on the front. Paul and I were really hoping that they were going to generate their file number today. Trying to get something off the agenda.
Okay, the next one is Austin and Gator
Yep.
at 49 West Chester Street.
Correct. I have the plans with this for this one. This is the one that we closed last time. That was for the reestablishment of buffer zone, the construction of the carriage house, removal of some structure that kind of stuck closer to the wetland. It's the one when we did the site visit where we had all the pennies in the yard and all that, and that cleanup that was there. I only included the condition for the monitoring reports because they're going to want to do that clean out and then replant that buffer zone for what's there. Other than that, from the kind of reviewing the discussion there, I didn't really think of any, but it does require waivers for the structure inside of 50, but they're decreasing their area inside of 50. And then obviously for the work adjacent to the wetland for the vegetation requires waivers as well. So I included a waiver for no adverse impact for the reduction for the pullback and the construction of the structure, but then also the cleanup and restoration of the buffer zone would be a net benefit. So I put the waiver together under both of those provisions.
So if there's no changes or questions or comments, we have a motion to issue as drafted.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Hurley at 5 Sandy Drive.
And this is another one we closed out last time. This was the project that was for the removal of the existing tennis court that was adjacent to the wetland, the construction of a new single-family home, construction of a garage, then driveways with landscaping and then regular utilities and grading. It's within land subject to coastal storm flow. Excuse me. And then the buffer zone to the wetland. It also required waivers because a portion of the garage that was going to be newly constructed just overlapped the 50-foot, and the tennis court adjacent to the wetland was going to be removed and that area revegetated. So again, it's a very similar waiver construction-wise for to the last one, and the conditions are kind of the same as well.
Okay. I have a motion to issue as drafted.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Arnold. Is it Lloyd? One of the-
It's Arnold. It's all right.
Arnold.
It's like the
At,
first thing.
11 East Street.
Yep, this one we closed this evening. That was for the deck on the back of the house for the door. I couldn't really think of any conditions to have there. It did require waivers for its location. And again, it just was with the no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative.
Sounds good. Do I have a motion to issue as drafted?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And Price at 35 Baxter Road.
This is one of the other ones we closed tonight. This was for the construction of a foundation beneath that existing dwelling and the vertical lift of that building, and then the installation of some window wells, and then the construction of the stairs. I know this is really nitpicky on my behalf, but the one stair that's being installed is technically inside the 50-foot setback, so I included a waiver for no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative. So, because it technically is inside the
Sure.
50. So, I would rather grant it and be nitpicky
Right,
than
yeah,
have
that's
this.
correct, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but again, I didn't have any conditions that went with that.
Okay. Do I have a motion to issue this as drafted?
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries
It's like the
unanimously.
most heavily regulated single stair of all time.
Yes.
Sorry, put the mouse on it.
Okay.
Yep,
So
and then
that's-
just
anything else?
one real quick, we closed Walsh this evening. Obviously, I took from the discussion as part of the notice, a plant list and a soil mix for staff approval, and then obviously invasive species control and monitoring with all of it. Was there anything else people wanted to?
So you say staff approved, it gets submitted to your office?
Correct.
Okay.
And we'll review it.
If he has,
Nothing has to
he'll
come
come
in.
Yeah.
That's right.
Usually what happens, just to let you know, is like if a plant list comes in, we just verify that everything that's on the list is something that's native to Nantucket, or if applied to some sort of landscape, that it's not an invasive species or something that's going to behave invasively. Typically, we just check for natives in the case where they're applying for natives, and verify for what's going in. And then a lot of times, too, we'll verify whether it's going in as seed or plugs or as a regular shrub, to try to ensure that it's going to have a chance to succeed. And then soil mixes, obviously, they submitted a soil test for the bank itself. When we reviewed like a soil mixture, what we're going to be looking for is something that's relatively compatible. Obviously, it sounds like this one we may be seeing a little bit more organic than what's found there.
Just a quick note on the compatible soils.
Yes.
So the silt or clay particles, that refers to, of course, the soil particle size, and has something to do with whether the soil is dead or whether it contains organic matter. Extraneous information came in that hearing.
Well, they are, I mean, one thing that is different about this application, this is the first I recall where somebody asked to actually inoculate the soil with what are, well, mycorrhizae aren't exactly microorganisms, they're fungi.
Fungi, yeah.
And I would think we would want them, again, to verify with the staff that these are the appropriate, you know, some kind of, something from where we get this.
I sure do agree, yeah.
To just, so we keep on
Some
top
clues,
of
we
it.
know what they're doing.
Right, what the source is.
Yeah.
Fungi source, we're not introducing something. foreign.
Yep. We can certainly add that into the order.
But Cinda has really done a lot of research on this. I mean, I've received many papers and things, and it sounds like it's really a good idea. So it's great that somebody's looking into this.
Well, if it's a non-watering way to get beach grass to establish that doesn't involve excess
Non-fertilizer, yeah.
fertilizer or excess watering, then that's easy to
That's great,
maintain,
yeah.
and I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, the research shows that it establishes lake after.
That's good. I think that'd be useful in other projects.
Well, those would be interesting conditions, but I think.
Okay. And anything else we need to discuss?
If other
Okay, I
enforcement
guess
orders.
we're ready to go to other business.
Wow.
So, no minutes.
No, sir.
Reports, CPC.
I appreciate the reports from Art in here too, for the CDCM. I looked through all of it.
We had a meeting yesterday and divvied up untaken, I think the applications are all in divvied up untaken things, and I was paired up with the land in Nantucket, the 90, how many acres is that farmland? And also with the Green Point Boathouse. And the other thing that's happened, and I don't know if this is right now, I'll just mention it, somebody from the Pond Coalition, I couldn't understand, and I don't know.
Bob Williams.
What's that?
Bob Williams contacted you.
Yeah, about this foliar thing they want to try
On knotweed and on Phragmites, actually.
Phragmites
And I
and
told him
Pond.
we needed.
I don't know, I just heard about that this afternoon. I haven't found the application, but I haven't looked. I got a huge thing from
He came and talked to me, and I said that that you were on the CPC, and that he should talk to you, Ernie, and to Kelly and Karen. And so he's raised money to do foliar application. I mean, he's got a contractor that's a aquatic species invasive removal expert, but it's someone that has used clip and drip in the past, and so he's got a little thing talking about clip and drip versus foliar applications. And the pros and cons and the cost and disturbance. And I told him, that I obviously prefer clip and drip, but I thought he should talk to you, Kelly, and Karen, and Bam, to see. Basically, he's trying to figure out if they got the money for application for Hummock Pond, would it be something we permit? And I go, well,
The
there's.
pond, like,
Well, I don't really
For
understand
for
it. I
a
haven't seen the
3-acre pilot
application. I
project.
just heard from the guy today, and I said I was going to look it up tonight, and then I don't think I had been paired up with that application because I hadn't heard about it. I hadn't even seen it on the list. That doesn't mean much.
He submitted it. Yeah, he did show me the application. I didn't read through it, but
it's kind of weird to get money. I guess, the project doesn't get approved. It won't get approved.
well, no, I mean, he's raised money for improving the pond for all kinds of things. So, but this is
Okay.
one of the things they think is doable. And I said, well, if you did that, I'd prefer that there are water quality samples taken for glyphosate at the time of application, 2 weeks later, 2 months later, and probably a year later, to see what the retention rate of glyphosate is in the water. And I said I wanted him to talk to you and Kelly and Karen and people that are experts on applications of this.
Yeah, I'm not at all, I'll say wait.
But I knew you were on the CPC, and I said, you know, if you're...
Well, I'm gonna look up the application tonight.
Okay.
With CPC.
NP and EDC,
Nothing.
mosquito control.
They're almost done. They're still doing applications for the next 2 weeks.
Well, they had a presence at the county fair,
Mm-hmm.
and she was well-spoken and seemed to be interested in the work, so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else? Any other committee?
We had Hector McDonald come and talk to her and I both at the field station last week. He's a treatment specialist on mosquitoes and ticks, and he does garlic sprays, but he also does a couple of other sprays that are, the garlic sprays are fine, but he does a couple of permethrin yard sprays that are a little worrisome. And then one other one that's even one level up, that's a little bit of a stretch. But anyway, he came and introduced himself, and he's been doing collections of mosquitoes and looking at. There's one person on Hummock Pond, a new person that doesn't understand that there are bugs in nature, and so we're trying to work with this person. They probably have called you too. Not yet. Hope they don't.
Okay, commissioners' comments.
I guess I had a question, Jeff, maybe for you. I was walking at Pocomo Point a few days ago, like towards Pulpus Harbor.
And the access ramp that's there?
No, not the access ramp, but the property all the way at the end, kind of on the creek, has a series of sprinklers at the top that have hoses going down to sprinklers at the bottom. And they're placed like every 15 feet or so. I took some pictures and I just have
Yeah, if you
time
send them
get
to me,
off the camera.
there were some spots that were doing some of the work that we had permitted for replantings. I just have to check to see if that's the right spot. So if you send those to me, we'll follow up, because there's a number of projects that are active right there
Right, you
on the
could
point.
see that there was a lot
Yeah,
of stuff
so
going on.
we'll definitely follow up on that. We were out there the other day, and I didn't see any last week, but
I've gotten a lot of
Definitely check.
calls about the bobcat nimble, because you can see it from the field station. And I said, I assume that was with the removal of parts project to remove the...
correct. So we actually have a series of projects that access. There's the one on the end. There's the two properties in a row that have the installation of dune guard that's going in.
Mhm.
And then there's the project that involves the removal of those terraces and the reconstruction of those stairs
Mhm.
that we've permitted as well. Then that's the access point for those projects. So they've all been kind of, a couple have been running kind of simultaneously.
Mhm.
And then
There's
when
a
they're,
lot of bobcat activity.
yep, and when they're done, they usually, in lack of better terms, take apart that access again.
Mhm.
So
Did you see that picture about the berm that I sent to you, forwarded to you?
yes,
Okay.
I did get that on my to-do list for tomorrow.
Yeah, that's, I can't even remember the address, is, shoot.
Yes, it's a Thursday and Friday project.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Administrator.
Yep, I do, just real quickly, I hope everyone got in their packet, we had a monitoring report come in on CMDM.
Mhm.
I know Art is still here, so I'm sure if you have any questions, he'd be happy to answer those if you want some more time to review it. But I wanted to be sure it got into your hands, because I know that's a project that is of interest to the commission. Not that all monitoring reports are, but
Can we, the only thing is the pictures came out not great.
Yeah, the picture went
You know, we couldn't really evaluate it based on, can we get hard copy?
sure,
or,
I can definitely get.
Those are the dark pictures?
Yeah.
I'll just cut hard copies for everyone, then, and then you guys can. I'll
This-
get them.
this
I'll
is
get them
one-
to you in some way, but
Yeah, yeah.
if you have any questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to follow up if you have them. And after you get those, to take a look.
I read through it pretty closely.
Mhm. Thanks, Art, for getting this to us.
Yep.
You know,
It's really helpful.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting myself.
I saw the one about the seaweed, sea beach knotweed, which basically is not there.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, in the best of circumstances, you're lucky if you see that 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes and goes.
It's the magic of Sea Beach Network.
Yeah, that's how it works.
But
That was pretty thorough, too.
other than that, we're still working on a couple of those projects to bring in front. Oh, we do have one more for tonight. We actually ended up, I need to fix some of the paperwork for it, and then I'll have it in front of you. One of the houses on Sheep Pond Road recently put its septic tank onto the beach. Just the bank had eroded and it uncovered. So I issued out an enforcement to have it removed. But I need to fix, I had some wrong information on the paperwork, so I need to fix that and bring it back. But we'll just need you guys to ratify that at some point going forward. And they know, once it's removed, they're going to end up coming back with a notice to deal with, obviously, what's going to happen with the house and the property. But we wanted to get the tank out before it was not reachable by
Do you have
man
an
or
address
machine.
for that?
I want to say it's 33. It's the Fogg residence that's there.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot about, at Cisco, we still have a section of art installation up in the air has,
Yes, I spoke with Mr. Ritz about that earlier this week.
coastal
To get
erosion
that
structure
removed.
that was way up in the air that we asked to have removed, and there's a section that's only about 6 feet long that's still sticking up, and
Yeah. That was the one that when they originally did that work was still involved in the beach, and that has
Oh, is
since
that
cleared
where
out.
that
Yeah.
situation has changed? Oh.
Yeah, that section of the shoreline this summer was really erratic. It
it's
eroded a
filled in
lot.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's still up in the air, yeah.
So,
But yeah, he just didn't want to remove that, or we didn't ask to remove all of it?
no, that was the section that was at the one end that it was still, it was much closer to the beach.
Oh,
And they
okay.
moved the rest, and it has since cleaned out from underneath it. It just needs to be removed.
Okay.
So, it has re-elevated itself.
Okay. I just couldn't
And
tell
it now
when it
needs to be
happened.
removed.
Okay.
They're just trying to schedule the excavator to make it out there,
Okay.
to remove it.
Anything else, Jeff?
That's it for me.
Did you do any enforcement orders or from the pond?
I'll give a quick update on
We did
Humming
last
Pond.
week.
I was going to wait until actual work had taken place, but per your guys' arrangements, we've had the first of 2 site meetings on the site with the conservation restriction holder, which is the land council. John Bartlett was there, myself and the DPW to discuss primarily the cleaning out of the drainage culvert between the Millbrook side wetland that's there, that little hole that holds water, then the culvert that comes across into the main wetland, to discuss the installation of riprap and clean out of that pipe. And then also to do some work on the side of Millbrook Road to better inspect the condition of that end of the culvert and clean that end of the culvert out as well. It was kind of Mr. Bartlett's observations that that side of the system was really the root cause of the problem for the culvert and the sedimentation into the newly constructed portion of the wetland. So we discussed that at great length, and we also discussed our expectations for plantings and kind of reiterated the fact that we're expecting the same number of shrubs that were in the original permit application to be included in the constructed area. And then what we expected as far as plugs and other seeding goes and kind of the timing and sedimentation measures. And we'll have another on-site meeting when they begin the actual work for the drainage, and then when they start to do the plantings of the shrubs here the next couple of weeks, once they've obtained all of that plant material with that same group to kind of supervise its way through to completion. Obviously, it's not going to be really back in front of you guys for any sort of substantive change to the enforcement action. I wouldn't anticipate until after the growing season started and we see what kind of survivorship was available through the winter for what was planted. Because I know our letter specifies we're looking for 90% or greater survivorship of what's planted. So there may be some replanting in the spring. So I don't anticipate releasing that enforcement until that condition is met. So that obviously is going to take some time, but I think they can make some substantial progress. I don't know if you have different impressions from the site visit for what was going to happen. I was hoping that they would have started, because would like to bring in probably for the next meeting on the 1st, some pictures of what was constructed. There's supposed to be photo documenting the construction as to what's going on to bring back in front of everyone as well. So with that one, it'd be nice to bring that one to an end.
Yeah, no kidding. But the banks are kind of weedy, but at least they're vegetated. They look
Yeah, they're kind of sparse still. I think we'd like them to do kind of another seeding on those as well to help fill in the gaps a little bit. But I think right now our primary focus is down in the wetland portion for plants where there's nothing, it's open, is to kind of load up the shrub requirement in through that section to help tie that up for the winter, and then to clean up that culvert so we don't have flow issues or backup issues into the winter and then into the spring, and be flushing sediments into the wetland again.
Again, yeah.
Is it all coming off the dirt road?
Yeah, a lot of the sediments that come in through that pipe on Millbrook come off of Millbrook Road, just from the dirt road that's there.
Put a lot of loose soil in it on top of that.
Yeah, as Mr. Bartlett again kind of expressed his historical perspective on that, that a lot of the sedimentation issues in that little kettle that's there are primarily from Millbrook Road, at least in his experience.
Yeah, I mean, that road really erodes.
So,
and then they
but I will say
fill it.
it was really nice to have him on the site visit. It was nice to have everyone on the site visit, but it was really nice to get him on site and get some of his, and he's obviously been dealing with that wetland in that corner for his whole life. So it was nice to get some of his perspective on his thoughts for that area and make sure that we're not only satisfying our requirements, but covering the corrective action for the property owner as well. So that was helpful.
Good. We're all done. Do I have a motion to close?
So moved.
Adjourn.
Adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
It's a short meeting, but it seemed longer.
Well, it's because we had
With the back-to-back.